Today we have the new IFI hip-dac tree in for review. IFI created a unit that is now not quite as colorful, not quite as playing as the original IFI hip-dac and the hip-dac 2, but the sound actually improved. So let's see why you would go for the IFI hip-dac tree and whether it is worth your hard-earned money. This is a portable DAC/headphone amplifier. A DAC amp is basically a unit which has both the digital to analog converter and also the headphone amplifier parts embedded in the same unit. So you won't need an external amplifier, you won't need a different DAC, and you can't even do that. What you can do is use one of the two Type-C ports at the back, and actually you have to use both. One of them is for data and one of them is for charging. The older IFI hip-dac units used to have a Type-A male port, which was unusual, but it did kind of make sense because you were able to use the IFI hip-dac 2 and the hip-dac 1 with an OTG converter. Now with the hip-dac 3, you need to use it with a Type-C to Type-C cable for your smartphone, which is convenient actually, because those are much smaller, there are more options to purchase one, and they generally look a bit better. hip-dac 3 comes with a lot of features, and most of them are not quite as useful as using it in its default state. As I've explored in my written review, it has two headphone outputs, one balanced in 4.4mm format and one in the 3.5 single-ended format. Both of them are of a good quality. The balanced output has better driving power and better reliability. It has a better sonic performance, like we see with most other DAC amps. So if you can use the balanced headphone output, always, it is always better on all devices out there. The drawback is that the balanced headphone output tends to have a slightly higher noise floor, which is audible, and especially with IMs or in-ear monitors, you have to go around it by either not using the balanced headphone output, by using EMs which are not quite as sensitive, or by using smart solutions that would reduce the output noise. If you try to implement their IMatch, which I advise against using. IMatch is like a way of them limiting the background noise. It reduces the noise floor, it reduces the hissing, which typically results from the source having a high output impedance, but it compresses the dynamic range, it compresses and flattens the soundstage, and the whole sound sounds overdriven, and you get a pretty high amount of distortion, clipping, a lot of issues. So don't use the IMatch, just deal with the noise floor either by purchasing EMs which are not sensitive, or use the hip-dac 3 with headphones only. In my experience, you can actually use it with most EMs just fine. You don't really hear the noise floor, it's already minimal, so including the IMatch is not necessary. We also have the power match, which is IFI's way of saying that it can drive headphones which are hard to drive. But this unit has around 400 milliwatts of power in balanced mode per channel, so it's okay. The driving power is not that high. It won't do well with most hard to drive headphones like HiFiMan Heshe 1000 Special Edition, but it's enough for most headphones. So you don't really need to engage the power match, because the power match has the same effect as the IMatch. Both of them will compress the dynamic range, will flatten the soundstage. There is just one layer of soundstage. It's wide, it's quite wide, but it's just one layer. So both IMatch and power match should not be activated ever, because if you don't activate them, the sound of the hip-dac 3 is much better. We have an XBass function, which is actually quite useful. The XBass tends to enhance the bass between 50 Hz and 150 Hz. Against IFI's own marketing materials, the XBass will enhance everything in the bass except for the lowest sub-bass. So you get a thicker, bloomier sound with a stronger bass. You don't really get much more sub-bass, especially at least in my test with all of the headphones that I tested. I got a much better mid-bass and upper bass. The sound gets bloomy, there is a bit of boominess, but at the same time, when something sounds bright or harsh, this is quite welcome. So I would recommend using the XBass as needed. It isn't something to be used all the time, but it's not to be avoided, not like IMatch and power match. IFI hip-dac 3 went in the same direction as the other IFI hip-dacs, so it's a slightly warm, musical, slightly intimate. The sound is never very wide, but it's quite enjoyable and musical. The sound is super pleasing to the ear. This typically means that it's smooth in the textures, so it doesn't have hard edges, it doesn't have sharp textures, although if you engage IMatch or power match, it will have pretty sharp and pretty fatiguing textures. The textures will be very edgy. But if you don't engage it, It's super nice, it's super chill, it has a very natural type of sound. I really like the sound of the hip-dac tree. I think that it sounds much, and I mean much better if you don't engage anything on it. Just listen to it as it is. It's superb, it's super pleasing, it's dynamic, it's punchy. The sound tends to be natural. There is a slight hint of darkness in the sound because the treble tends to be softly rolled off. So once the treble reaches a certain point, it starts rolling off, which is okay. If you have bright or sharp sounding headphones, it will take the edge away, but with very smooth or very dark sounding headphones, it will sound a bit too smooth, and you will lack the excitement in the treble. For example, the sparkle in the treble won't be that strong, you won't get a lot of reflections, a lot of high-end information, but you won't get fatigue either. IFI hip-dac tree is convenient also because of its size. It's quite portable and quite small, as you can see. Convenient to carry. It has an analogic volume wheel, which means that there is a bit of channel imbalance at the start of the wheel, but you typically don't use that. Also, with most headphones and with most TMs, you are always between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. So you never have to worry about IMatch or power match with most headphones and DMs. If you can't go beyond 3 o'clock with a pair of headphones without power match, you won't be able to go with power match either. The sound will just be distorted, and I tested this with multiple headphones, including Dan Clark XBass, HiFiMan HA1000 Special Edition. All of them just don't sound better with the IMatch engaged. So if you have something that is hard to drive enough, better purchase a different IFI product. They have desktop amplifiers, they have the iCan, they have a lot of stuff that can drive hard to drive headphones. hip-dac tree is just not that thing. This is a portable DAC amp made mostly for easy to drive headphones and DMs. And with DMs, the noise floor is minimal. In my experience, I was able to listen to most DMs I have without even noticing the noise floor without the IMatch engaged. The IMatch also cannot be engaged on both headphone outputs at the same time. It's either on the 3.5mm or 4.4mm headphone output. And at the back, the unit doesn't charge while being used as a USB DAC, so you have to have two USB cables if you want to use it as a USB DAC. That's okay. I mean, a lot of companies are doing this to get a better sonic performance, because when you have separate data and charging ports, you get less noise in the sound, and that tends to act similar to a USB galvanic isolation. It helps. It really helps. That's a good step for I think. Overall, the unit looks pretty cool. It is made of metal. It doesn't get very hot during usage, so in my experience, it's okay to use it for long hours. The battery life is decent. It's about 8 to 9 hours in my experience. Very decent, especially when considering that I'm using it at about the middle volume. It doesn't do very well with the extremes, but the sound tends to be better at lower volumes, so the dynamic range has better extension, the sound is more dynamic, the detail is a bit better at lower volumes, although if you don't engage power match or IMatch, you are good to go up to 3 p.m. o'clock on the volume wheel. So up to that point you are very good. Above that, it tends to run into overdriving, which means that the sound sounds very driven. It has a slightly too strong drive factor, which tends to emphasize textures a bit too much. And doing that will cause the sound to be a bit fatiguing and also a bit harsh. So try to not go beyond 3 o'clock on the volume wheel if you can. On whether I would recommend it or not, as we're talking about an entry-level product, but if I am to be honest, compared to everything I heard in the price range, hip-dac tree is a very good unit. It's strong, it's reliable, it works pretty well. In my experience, it works well with TMs and headphones. So I consider it a fully recommended DAC amp. I just think that instead of having those features like IMatch or power match, it would have been a much better addition to have the leather case included in the package. That one is a premium, which costs 15% of the price of the hip-dac tree. That's much more useful than either IMatch or power match. So if there is an IFI hip-dac 4, I would like to have a transport case included, a high quality USB Type-C to Type-C cable for smartphones included, and they can simply just not include IMatch and power match. This thing needs a case so that you don't scratch it and so that it is easy to attach to a smartphone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope my videos are helpful. I hope you are enjoying your time at Audiophile Heaven. Please like this video and subscribe to Audiophile Heaven. I would really appreciate if you could share this video with your friends or go watch other videos. That's the most helpful thing you can do. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see each other really soon. Bye bye.